In this episode of the Exploring Information Security podcast, what are CBOMs?
Computers now have primary control of critical functions.
Houston, recommend vector transfer.
Your go for APU shutdown on time.
Roger, go for deploy.
Nice to be in orbit.
Welcome to the Exploring Information Security podcast, where you'll learn, explore, and grow your security mindset. I am your host, Timothy D. Block, and in this episode, we will be exploring Cryptography Bill of Materials, or CBOM. With me to do that is John Morello, the CTO and co-founder at Minimus. Show notes can be found at exploresec.com/EIS. Feedback for the show, timothy.dblock@exploresec.com. You can hit me up on LinkedIn. You can rate it on the favorite podcast platform. You can join our community. We have a Discord channel and a Google Groups. Go to the community tab on exploresec.com. So this was a really interesting one. I have not done a cryptography-based podcast since episode 2. This is episode 265. So haven't really dove into it a whole lot. This was an interesting one because it kind of aligns with the SBOM, or Software Bill of Materials, which I haven't really done that either, but that's essentially just a list. It's very similar to, hazard material, things like that. I had to do some of the Bill of Materials, what are things built out of, what do you have there in the military? So it's not a new concept, but for the cybersecurity space, it is. And definitely with this, post-quantum cryptography that's coming up, where you're going to have quantum computing cracking a lot of the old cryptography algorithms. Understanding where all that stuff is very important, as you'll hear me and John discuss. But I actually started out by asking John how he got into cryptography.
I've been doing it for a long time, going back to when I was at Microsoft 20 years ago. So it's something I've been involved with for I guess almost my whole career, really.
And CBOM is that? So it's a cryptography bill of materials. It's very similar. Is this all like, I was rereading some of this too in the email pitch, and at first I was kind of like, is this for everything? This seems like more of a development thing, or is this actually for a lot more than just development?
Well, the whole idea with it is that it provides a trustworthy, structured way to represent what cryptographic components and how they're configured for all kinds of purposes. I mean, it could be for development. It could be for people that are running infrastructure and operations. It could even be from like an audit perspective. If you're familiar with software bills of materials, which kind of came into vogue over the past 5 years or so, it's basically a way to describe, like, in this container image, for example, there's this package that has this version, and and so forth. And it's designed to be in a consistent, structured way so that other parts of the ecosystem can create those bills of material, can consume them, can then do automation based on them. So, for example, you might say, like, if I see that there is an SBOM that says that you've got some GPL v3 software component, maybe as an organization, I don't want that, and I can just reject that from the beginning of my pipeline because it's already been documented to say that it's that particular package and that particular license that's in it. So a few years ago, the idea was, that would be a valuable capability for cryptographic components as well, which, even though they are software, and you would have, you probably would see within your software bill of materials, you have like, OpenSSL, lib OpenSSL included in an image. It doesn't tell you like how it's configured, what algorithms and key lengths and, what mode it runs in and so forth. And so the idea with a CBOM is to take that same basic approach of providing a structured, machine-readable, consistent format for describing what's inside of something and how it is configured, and applying that specifically to the cryptographic components that are inside of a container image.
So I think there's this idea, like, can that be more useful than, I guess, SBOMs, right? I think we're just now really starting to get to actually finding new tooling and new ways of actually using the SBOMs. Like you said, like 5 years ago, everyone talked about it. It's a great idea, right? It's kind of our in cybersecurity, one of our basics, right? Inventory all the things so you know where all the things are at. Like, I guess, how do you apply it, or can this? Because like I said, it feels like SBOM has taken a little bit more to take off, and it's hard to do. I don't know if this is easier or what. Like, I guess, how do you?
I would say it's kind of the same level of effort, and actually, the whole point of the whole structure of CBOM is actually being folded into SBOM. So, it started off as this thing that was only in Cyclone DX, and it wasn't an SPDX, but now it's being basically merged, the CBOM format, into those tools. So, over the coming months, there won't be any longer like an SBOM and a CBOM as distinct like files and entities to deal with. CBOM will just be a subset, part of what you see in the SBOM, specifically for cryptographic components, which I think is better for everybody, right? Because it's less files to deal with, it's less complexity, it's more consistent in terms of how to access it and work with it. So all that's in flight now. Like, that's happening now. It's being incorporated into the schemas for both Cyclone DX and SPDX. So I don't know, over the next 6 months, let's say, regardless of which format that you use for your SBOM, you should be able to have CBOM cryptographic data included as part of that. So if you look at your SBOM and it says it has, glibc, nginx, and so on and so forth, it might also say it has libopenssl, and it has these configurations of that, these key links, these hashing algorithms, et cetera. The things that come in a separate CBOM today will just be artifacts and additional tags that exist on the data that's in that SBOM.
Yeah, I could see this being. I was thinking back to Heartbleed, right? Because that was kind of a cryptographic kind of issue, right? So I don't know if maybe you have a recollection of one, but I'm not thinking of one off the top of my head. But do you foresee some more of this, cryptographic issues coming up in the future?
It's less about, I think, dealing with like cryptographic based vulnerabilities. It's more, I think, to help you inventory what you've got, to find whether you have weak algorithms in place, weak key links in place, and to be able to do that discovery in a consistent way. Like, in the past, when we've gone from like TLS 1.0 to 1.1 and so forth, we went from 1K keys to 2K keys. Like, the way that you would have to go out there and figure out what do I have today was really unorganized. Like, it was like per application, per operating system, per like device, maybe, to figure that out. And it was really burdensome. It's really difficult for people to manage that. And as more of the ecosystem expresses that configuration in CBOM, it'll be way easier to build tools that say like discover the CBOMs for all these artifacts and all these components, and then to be able to map like, these are the algorithms that are in use. These are the ones that need to be updated because they're out of date or they may be in the future. And so it'll just make organizations it'll make it a lot easier for them to understand, to manage, and operate what they have from a cryptographic standpoint. And it's particularly important as of today. We're in the middle of going through post-quantum cryptography, and NIST is finalizing those post-quantum algorithms and so forth. And, we'll probably have like a FIPS 140-4, for example, in the future that, will codify recommendations around algorithms and key links and so forth for post-quantum. And as more of your environment is described in CBOMs, it'll be a lot easier for you to figure out what do you need to migrate to support post-quantum. Because again, you might be able to in the future say like, hey, show me across my entire container environment, all of the images that I build, all the infrastructure I deploy, show me all the places where I'm not running post-quantum resistant algorithms. And I'd be able to see that and, be able to assign work on that without having to do a bunch of manual one-off effort to do that discovery. So that's really the whole idea. And I think the biggest case where you're going to see people getting value out of this in the near future is that migration to post-quantum. It's something everybody's going to have to do. Like, people have already started it to some degree, but it'll be a lot easier to do it and to be able to prove that it's been done when more of the infrastructure and the environments are described in CBOMs.
So I guess what is post-quantum and why is it a security issue?
Well, I mean, this has had a project now for a number of years around what the project's just generally called Post-Quantum Cryptography, PQC. And the whole idea with this is that the math, basically, that's been used historically for all the cryptographic approaches that we commonly use today, like RSA, DES, and SHA, and so forth, like all these things that you're familiar with in the past, that the math that's been used to do that is largely defeatable, I guess, in the case of or the existence of quantum computers. And there have been, a number. I mean, for a number of years, there's been a lot of investment and research in that area. There's definitely been examples of, what I consider to be sort of early prototypes of quantum computing that have been built already. Almost certainly in the future there will be, some kind of quantum breakthroughs that will make it more feasible to go and basically decrypt information that's been encrypted with these non-quantum reliable defensible algorithms. And if you wait to move to post-quantum or quantum resistant algorithms only after those quantum computers are widely available, or at least available to your adversaries. If you wait for that, then basically everything that you've encrypted before, with these non-resistant algorithms, is subject for decryption in the future, right? So, obviously, there's scale limitations to this. But imagine if I recorded all of your TLS traffic today for the next year or whatever. I recorded all of that. That's all protected with the 2K RSA key and so forth today. Well, in the future, if quantum computing becomes a viable thing and something that I could use to apply it to reversing the encryption or decrypting the data, I could take and basically replay all of that traffic that I've recorded, and I could see the plain text of that traffic. So even though quantum computers are not broadly available today, being able to utilize quantum resistant algorithms today effectively future proofs the data that you're sending over the wire, that you're encrypting even at rest today for that matter, in a way that'll make it resistant to future quantum based attacks against it. And again, CBOM is there not as something that, it doesn't strengthen the encryption of anything. It doesn't change any of the math that's there. But what it does is it makes it a lot easier as a large organization. If you're some Fortune 500 sort of organization, you've got decades of computing in your enterprise already. You've got decades of legacy encryption algorithms in use. You've got decades worth of data that's already been encrypted utilizing those older algorithms. Having a lot of that estate described in CBOMs will make it easier for you to be able to identify the things that are potentially the weakest protected, and to be able to target, like going back and re-encrypting those things or providing some other kind of control to ensure they're protected in the future.
I'd also say it's a prioritization thing, right? So if you see something that you really, your keys to the kingdom or your crown jewels, right? You want to be able to prioritize that and get that to post-quantum.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, and there are people, I've heard stories of people sitting on drives, right? They're just ready, waiting for quantum computing to be able to crack some of this, the RSA, ECC stuff on encrypted drives so they can get it back, or I think bad guys are sitting on it or whatever.
I have no doubt that, that there's at least at the National Intelligence Agency level, there's probably things like that are occurring. And, and presumably, there's probably organizations that already have some kind of functional, prototype or maybe fully functional system that uses quantum computing to defeat their adversaries' existing cryptographic approaches. So, I mean, it's not a matter, I think, of if that happens, but, it seems pretty likely that there'll be some kind of breakthrough in the future, or, just some mass commercialization of technologies that have so far been more research projects that will enable these attacks to be something that's practically viable for a large audience of attackers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this kind of reminds me, this is kind of just history repeating itself, right? Like if you look back at the encryption history, going back to like the Caesar cipher, right? It's, back in the Roman eras, and that was cracked eventually. MD5, a lot of, I remember having to tell developers, don't use MD5 for your encryption.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. This is just the next evolution of it. We're going to get enough quantum to do the ridiculous math that it takes to crack this encryption, and then it's gone, right? So yeah, absolutely. So who should be doing this? Like within the security team, like where does this fall as far as a role or responsibility?
Well, I think in a lot of cases, it's not something so much that the security team will do as much as maybe the security team will encourage the adoption of it and, measure adoption, measure like how much of your, infrastructure applications that you have CBOMs for. But the whole idea with this is that because it's something that's just an extension effectively of SBOM, your DevOps teams, your developer teams that are already creating SBOMs, hopefully to describe the software that they're deploying, would just simply enhance those SBOMs and include the CBOM related data within those in the future as the standards evolve to support that. So I think like the security teams are the ones that might consume that data, but in terms of who's responsible for, the initial creation of, CBOM data, the maintenance of that to ensure it's accurate as the application changes over time. Ideally, that's not the security guys that are doing that, but it's the people that are closest to the application or the infrastructure that know it the best. They would be the ones that would do it. And then again, the security teams can take advantage of that to say like, hey, if there is a viable quantum decryption attack in the future and their board or their CISO says, okay, tell me how exposed we are to this. If you can consume the cryptographic configuration of your environment via this CBOM, it's a lot easier for you to be able to understand your exposure, understand your risk, and be able to identify like what parts of your environment you may want to mitigate that risk in most urgently.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and you mentioned kind of regulation or NIST. I was reading the HIPAA security rule that came out last year, and that was definitely in it. Is thinking about the move to post-quantum cryptography because quantum but it didn't set out any sort of guidelines as far as like you need to do it by this date. It was more like you need to start thinking about this kind of stuff. I think CBOMs come in.
NIST has had this PQC project running for a few years now, and I think it's at this point you could say it's kind of wrapping up, like finalizing. NIST has already done one round of selection of algorithms and determine key links. There's going to be another algorithm that's going to be selected, but I anticipate that during this year that they probably will finalize and say here is the official NIST guidance that'll be codified as some kind of FIPS standard that will say these are the NIST approved algorithms, NIST approved key links. These are the recommendations. And of course, there's a lot of guidance, not just within the U.S. federal government, but just, organizations worldwide that feeds on that, the reference, like if you need FedRAMP, you need to show that you're compliant with NIST 853 controls, and 853 controls are going to say it needs to be FIPS compliant. And so you're going to go back and say, okay, well, what does FIPS compliant mean for cryptography? It'll be post-quantum. It'll be something where you describe the cryptography in a CBOM probably. And so all this stuff, as it really becomes finalized, will make it possible for the whole ecosystem to absorb it. I mean, it seems like why would this take so long? I mean, we're truly, I think this does a great job with this stuff in general because it's truly like something that is like many cases like a multi-decade kind of decision, right? Like whatever you decide upon, like these algorithms, like people will literally build special purpose ASICs in silicon to accelerate that. There'll be implementations of it that are going to be built into effectively like every browser, operating system, web service, etc. So like whatever you do here, you have to be really sure that you're getting it right. And you're getting it right in a very forward-looking way. And to NIST credit, I think they've done a great job of that over the years, and I think they're doing a good job of it now. So like once it gets standardized, hopefully it's something that everybody will have a clear idea of what to do and what those best practices are, so they can actually start doing them.
Yeah, I didn't even realize NIST was actually working on like this as far as like a standard. So to your point, it's like, I think this is kind of the start, and that's what's really going to drive a lot of this too, right? Is regulation and standards around this stuff. How long, like thinking out, because again, they can codify it this year, but I don't know that everybody's going to start doing this. Like, I guess, what's the runway to this actually becoming a serious issue, or like we've kind of lost our opportunity to update this, and now we're having to scramble to do it? Like, what do you see as far as?
Well, I think there's a couple ways it could evolve. Like the most calm one that I guess we should all hope for would be that NIST completes its process and determines like these are the approved algorithms, these are the approved key links and configurations. It publishes a FIPS 140-4, something of that nature in the future that describes all that. So everybody's got guidance. And then as part of that, they say, look, we recommend that everybody migrate to these by 2029 or whatever it is, right? So they probably would provide some kind of recommended time frame for doing that. And then organizations could just kind of include that in their planning and so forth. And, presumably what's happened in the past would be that, once that's codified, vendors in the space, your Cisco and Microsoft and AWS and everybody would start again implementing that inside of Windows and EC2 load balancers and network equipment that terminates TLS connections and so forth. So you'd see the ecosystem do that, and then as people just kind of naturally refresh their equipment, they would be able to take advantage of these things. That's kind of the ideal way that we would hope that it goes. What's always possible though is that you could have a situation in which there is some kind of quantum breakthrough, but any given point in time, right? You might see something on Hacker News or something that's like, such and such lab in China or US for that matter, wherever it is, really had a breakthrough in this. They have a viable sort of mass producible quantum computer that can, break RSA keys, for example, if that's possible, well, then everything becomes much more of a scramble at that point. So it just really depends on how that comes. But, regardless, even if that doesn't happen, I think it would be unwise to think that will never happen. And so just adopting these modern quantum resistant algorithms will future-proof the data that you are protecting today, that you are assuming that even if an adversary intercepts today, they can't do anything with. It will protect you in the future when those quantum resistant algorithms or when those quantum computers actually become reality.
I was trying not to ask this, but now that you've said labs and research, how is AI kind of playing into all this?
Well, I don't know that AI has a direct sort of play in here, other than the fact that presumably people that are doing cryptographic research and looking for opportunities to, create quantum computers or just to look for weaknesses in existing algorithms or new algorithms, presumably they leverage, LLMs to perform, math-related tasks and research tasks for them. So, I think it's more just sort of a general purpose thing, more so than there being some kind of very specific AI-related scenario here. But, surely just like it accelerates lots of other kinds of development and research, and I'm sure it can be used to accelerate this kind of development and research as well.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't see it directly tied there, but I felt like I had to ask the question, especially if we're talking about cracking it and, a lot of the advancements in AI more recently. Is there anything that we haven't covered as far as this topic goes?
No, I think we covered the main things with it. The main message I would want people to come away with is the fact that even though today, right now, there's not a really known, viable, wide scale, quantum attack, the risk is the longer that you wait to protect against that, the greater the risk to all the data that you are sending out there over the wire today that you're assuming is going to be safe, because those attacks don't exist. Is it realistic that you've got people recording every bit of a TLS session at all times? Probably not. But there are probably some scenarios where that could really be interesting. If you're a particularly a high value sort of target, or maybe you're doing, conducting some sort of financial transfers, or, things that could be extremely sensitive data that you might be sharing and over a less secure channel where you're really relying on cryptography to protect that data. Those are the kinds of things that could be most at risk if one of those quantum attacks becomes viable. And so the sooner that people begin protecting themselves against that and the data against that, basically the further back the attacker would have to go to find data that could be potentially extracted from one of these encrypted channels.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What are some resources you recommend for diving into this a little bit more?
NIST has a whole project around like I said, post-quantum cryptography. That's one really good one there. We have some links in the blogs that we recently published around CBOM to that, and it describes some of the standards that Cyclone DX and SPDX is using around how they are evolving their SBOM format to incorporate that. And I'm sure there's some good material out there, just generally of what are potential paths to quantum attacks and where does that sit today. I don't have any one of those links off the top of my head, but I'm sure those exist. But where I would start would be the NIST PQC project page, the links that we have in the blog post that we wrote, and Ortal can certainly share those with you. And that would really be the best places to begin.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you like to plug?
We are building, CBOMs in our product. And, one of the things that's an advantage of utilizing hardened container images from us is that a lot of this work to integrate modern cryptographic algorithms and new versions of upstream open source software they're able to take advantage of them, the work required to do that, we do for you. You just simply pull a new image from us. That image happens to already include post-quantum capabilities. We show you that in the CBOM, which we include in every image build. And that really makes it much more straightforward for you to ensure that as you update your open source stack, that you're going to get these benefits without having to do the work to actually do the integration for them.
You have what's the website for the company?
Minimus.io.
Okay. All right. Well, John, this was a pleasure. A lot of really good information in here. And also, we didn't get too mathy, which is good. Because I don't know if I could have led that conversation, but appreciate you coming on to talk about CBOMs.
Yeah, it was great talking to you, man. And if you have any other questions or follow-ups or whatever, let us know. I'll be happy to talk to you about them or answer anything that you have in the future.